In that ink-black depths of my subconscious, I asked myself, what kind of hell is this? I found myself lying on a brown carpet, rough like sandpaper, and surrounded by the rotting walls of that apartment. JJ's room was next to me. The door was closed, and she was screaming inside, because he was in there with her. I wanted to get up, to save her, but my body was numb, and my head felt like it had been crushed into a soft paste. A metallic taste burned my tongue. Where was my mother? Probably passed out on the couch in some chemically induced state of bliss. So I lay there with a soft whimper, crawling out from my throat, as something wet trickled down my swollen cheek, listening to her wails, as the walls faded away and sank back into the dark abyss of my mind to drift like a buoy lost at sea.
East River 5 and 7. This call came in at 1901. Advised a male and a female were arguing with each other near to the car dealership that's over there, the southeast corner. It's a white male, 50 years old, 6 foot, medium build. He has gray hair. He has jeans and is riding a motorcycle. And then there's a white female, 5'4", medium build, thin.
When I came back to reality, it was slow and painful. The world developed in front of my eyes like a Polaroid bathing in a tray of chemical solution. A blank wall hovered above me, and I could hear the distant beeping of electronic equipment near me before blacking out again. This soon became a pattern. Minutes of conscious awareness mixed with what felt like days of floating in a lake at night. When I was awake, there were bits and pieces of data that my brain managed to record. Voices speaking urgently outside of my room. The rapid clattering of footsteps as shadows flew past my room's frosted windows. A vague humanoid shape was standing outside my room, staring at me. One night, I opened my eyes to find myself still lying in darkness on plain, sterile sheets. An uncomfortable pressure plugged my nose. They must have given me a tube. The air traveling through it was cool and sterile. My nerves were numb and faint. It felt like my mind was stuck in a bubble. Through this bubble, though, I heard a squeak, rubber against a smooth surface. This did not register as a disturbance, partly because I no longer cared. Then something moved past me on my left. My eyes slowly lifted up, as it walked up to the ivy bag that dangled above me. The outline began to take on more detail, as my eyes became familiar with the dark space. It was an adult male in a nurse's uniform and a surgical mask. In his hand, I saw the small glint of a needle. As he raised it up to a tube, the equipment continued to steadily beep. Whatever drugs they had put in me must have really worked, because I didn't react, as the man inserted the syringe into one of the orifices of the bag. Within me was the small spark of a spirit that wanted to fight on, or maybe it was just a primal response. Whatever the interpretation, I simply watched. The door opened. The male quickly glanced over his shoulder and twitched like he had been prodded with something. He went limp and tipped over like a tree before crashing into the fourth bag and slipping to the ground. Trailing behind him was a thin double set of wires that led all the way to the door, where another figure was standing with a taser in their hand. They dropped it on the ground before scurrying over and picking me up. In that hazy darkness, I saw Marco's face. I remember him mumbling "you lucky son of a bitch" before fading away. When I came back, I was being pushed down a hospital corridor. Most of the lights were off, and there were no staff, which I found odd even in my drugged state. The next time I came to, I was sitting in the backseat of a car with my partially filled IV bag lying in my lap. Streetlights washed over us, as Marco turned onto the street. The road was empty, the sidewalks too. No one was around. It was as if the whole world had gone radio silent. The gulf of my subconscious became a new home for me. A sea of black ink, where I sail peacefully with no interference from the outside world. No matter what they did to my body, I'd still be here, eternally drifting. Even if they killed me, I would simply slip into a deeper sleep until what was left of my memories and consciousness gradually faded away like a photo in reverse development. Time in that realm passed similarly to when JJ and I lived in that state home after the incident. The apartment was declared unsafe for us to live in. My mother was diagnosed and fit to watch over us, leaving us in a place with walls and people we did not recognize. The memory was out of focus. The guardian watching over us at the time was an adult black female with spectacles and a pet, maybe a domestic feline. There were other adolescents who lived with us, but I don't remember anything about them, despite the fact that we all slept in the same room together in bunk beds and sleeping bags. But really, we all tuned into our own channels, listening to our own intense frequencies or the lack of them. Especially JJ and me. The incident was too fresh, face still bruised and swollen in parts. From what I remembered, he towered 6 feet above me, as I blocked the door to JJ's room. The authorities took photos of the damage afterward for evidence. I only saw them once, and I studied it, turning it over and observing it from different angles in an attempt to recognize something in that mass of inflated meat and tissue. I couldn't even see my eyes. And JJ had changed. She had turned despondent and had a stare that signaled her mind was off somewhere else, away from this plane of existence. I didn't ask anything of her, I just held her close, as much good as that did her then, and she held that pillow. We didn't see our mother until a year or so after. She was still thin and fidgeting, but her skin appeared to shine a bit more, and her eyes had regained a little of that nurturing attention that she used to have. The male she was with was gone, probably rotting in a prison shower somewhere, and she had gotten a job along with a small house down in Lakeside. It was a new life, she promised.
I have to work a lot, but
She scratched at her arm where the track marks were beginning to fade.
it'll be different now.
JJ reached for her, but I kept her in my lap, as I inspected my mother, hoping to catch some tell or sign that she was lying. Dilated pupils, discrepancy in speech pattern, goosebumps. I knew I'd know them when I saw it, for I had seen it plenty before. But there was nothing there. I wasn't completely satisfied at the time, but I also didn't want to stay there. The memory faded away again, and my consciousness developed enough to bring me back to reality, where I was lying on a stiff bed in another motel room with its blank walls and mass-produced art. There's a TV sitting on a dresser, and it was playing at low volume a news broadcast, a headline discussing a national state of emergency address. Someone cleared their throat, and I spun my head towards the window, reaching for my service weapon before realizing I had nothing on but a hospital gown. It was Marco peeking out of the curtains. With a bruise sitting across the right side of his forehead, he looked at me with vacant regard. The words for a response had left me, and I instead focused on the bruise, which had swelled slightly.
Yeah,
Marco nodded, feeling the bruise and wincing a little.
you could have pulled back on the swing a little bit.
I did. It was the flat part of the blade that I chose to smack him over the head with. However, it was a pretty hard swing, even denting the blade a little. Before I had done it, I told him that he should stay dead. What are you doing here? He scoffed and shook his head.
What the fuck do you think?
I sat up in bed, gritting my teeth a little at the dormant pain sitting with my gut. I told you to stay gone.
Oh, I was planning on it. Was at another motel almost 100 miles out of town.
Marco glanced out the window once more.
Then I made the mistake of turning on the news. That's where I heard the story.
I shut my eyes to block out the pain in my gut, where it felt like a piece of my life that had just been cut out of me. I noticed that my skin looked extremely pale, as if all the remaining color had been sucked out.
I'm sorry,
Marco said without looking at me. I looked up at him, and the void sitting in my chest was suddenly filled by roaring fire. The righteous arrogance to think you know so much, to think you know what's best for the world, and to think that you have the authority to just make that call. Our job was simply to observe and collect. That was it, but Marco always had trouble being discreet. And now both of our lives were shattered. I wanted to stand up and spew hellfire upon him, tie him up, and shoot him right in the parking lot. But just as quickly as it arrived, the fury in my chest dissipated, leaving seared flesh behind.
I'm sorry about your mom.
Marco said, switching his focus to the ground.
And JJ.
That scream. It echoed in my mind again and made me twitch.
Anyway, I heard you were held up at the hospital and imagine that you didn't have long until the department came for you, so.
He looked up then with a hard look on his face that made his bruise appear purple.
Thought I'd return the favor.
He said it like he was trying to vomit up gravel. I simply nodded my head.
You had some stuff in the trunk, by the way.
He gestured towards a change of clothes and all my photo equipment sitting next to the bed. On top of it all was my black book and my camera.
I'd be careful when traveling. There's this guy I met briefly downstairs, some goth runaway. He's been listening to this antenna radio he's got while he holds up here. Says some people are taking the news kinda hard. So be careful.
I shot Marco a sharp glare. He looked directly in my eyes and shook his head.
I regret nothing. This is better than dying in the dark.
Then Marco, the last person I ever knew in this world, picked up his backpack and turned for the door. It took JJ. Marco stopped with his hand on the doorknob. He squeezed it before shaking his head.
I'm sorry, Z.
Marco. I stood up and almost crumpled over from the pain. I fell onto the second bed and propped myself up with my arm. I need her. She's all I have in this world. Please. Marco stood rubbing his thumb against his palm before turning to face me once again.
The report on Lucy, the error, the inconclusive data. What does it mean?
I felt it rise up my throat like a horrific tapeworm, scratching my throat as it reached the tip of my tongue, ready to fly out of my mouth and into the world. Marco scoffed again, but there was something broken behind it.
You can't say it, can you?
I shut my eyes, as the blood rushed to my head, making it throb.
Was she one of them? Did you kill the real Lucy?
I don't know. I took a breath, as tears stung my eyes. I don't know. Maybe, I don't know. I never would have done it, if it was. I just. My throat burned, as it lay barren and stripped. I swallowed to choke the pain down, but it stayed. Marco was in a similar state, as the truth sank into him like a knife, killing any hope of whatever he was looking for, closure, justice, maybe. He rubbed the tears from his eyes and took in a deep breath. He could no longer look at me.
Where did it take JJ?
I don't know.
What the fuck do you know?
No data. No theories. No leads. Not enough. I was stuck in the dark, and my sister was out there. She had to be. I would accept no other possibilities. He chuckled again, and the veil fell from his eyes and mine. All those hours in the car, all those photos we took and developed, all the people I. Is this what it feels like to be on the losing side of a war? Marco shook his head, as he ran a thought through his head. Then he stepped past me and picked up my camera.
I'll be at a motel a couple miles out of town. When you find her, call the vacation inn and ask for me.
He raised the camera and took my picture before tossing it back to me.
And if we happen to make it out of whatever shit show you drag us into, then do me a favor and tell me what you see in that.
Then he left. I watched, as he made his way into the parking lot. There were only a few cars lingering in the parking lot, and the green station wagon parked at the very edge was the one he decided to break into and hotwire. It took him about 8 minutes of tinkering and dealing with that blaring horn, before he ignited the engine and drove off. No one came out to see what was going on. This was a new era, the outside world was a new hostile landscape, and most people were smart enough to stay holed up inside whatever cave they could find. At least some people. For every cave dweller, there is a hunter. The world had changed, and I turned up the volume of the news broadcast to learn what I could, as I poured the developer into its tray and began to nurse the Polaroid. A white female with neatly trimmed blonde hair stood outside on a street corner downtown somewhere. The headline of the day was Entity Hunters. I thought it was a cool alternative title for my job until video footage popped up of a group of adult males with rifles moving towards a distant farmhouse, as a body lay censored behind them in the dirt. The broadcast cycled through more footage of multiple other groups. Apparently, they had begun popping up around the country. The military's response to this was slow due to a wave of paranoid shootings within units. The outline of my face developed steadily in the picture, as I treated it with the tongs. It stared up at me with hollow eyes in the red hue of the safety lights, and a sense of unease began to crawl up my nerves. I felt like asking if it was a child of God, half expecting it to give a response. The details began to flood in, and I quickly moved it over to the next tray, my hands trembling the whole way. I hung the photo up to dry. It displayed a Hispanic young adult male, black hair, busket, amber eyes that were big like his sister's. There were no missing or incorrect features. There was loose skin around the eyes, but that seemed more due to pure exhaustion than anything else. His eyes stuck out to me the most, though. Their size was ideal for capturing large amounts of information. It was only a question of whether or not he was able to make sense of any of it. His strange stare, coupled with the rigid composure of the rest of his face, displayed an uncertainty that was underpinned by something more primal. A phone rang. I jumped. No one should have known I was there, unless Marco was sloppy. Then the department could be waiting outside. I peeked out the window and saw the same parking lot I saw before with the same number of cars. It's possible one of them was already a surveillance vehicle, and they had already picked off Marco down the road. I didn't pick it up. They could be sending calls to everyone's room to locate me. It rang for about a couple more seconds before going silent. Nothing outside moved. I ducked behind the bed as the loud crack went off in the distance. My heart clung to my ribcage as I waited for a follow-up. Then the phone started ringing again. At this point, I thought I was cornered. They must have known I was there. With no other choice, I picked up the phone, hoping that I could dissuade them that it was me. However, I was met with only static for a moment, as I held it up to my ear.
Gee.
I froze.
Gee, I've been looking for you.
Even the imperfect imitation of Lucy's voice managed to take my knees out from under me. A ragged breath escaped me, as it continued to speak.
I have something you're looking for. Come to town. Take me up road.
Its voice faded back into the sea of static, where the tune of a song took its place. Its rhythmic beat and high-pitched keyboard notes were similar to what I heard emanating from the gymnasium on prom night, but through that sea of distorted noise and static, I heard the soft whimper of a young adolescent female. I gasped and called JJ's name, as the line went dead. How did it know I was here? Bursting through the front door, I scanned the upper balcony and the parking lot for any signs of movement or lingering eyes. Nobody. The wind whistled by, carrying the sound of JJ's whimpering with it, where it would be lost forever. I quickly changed and was soon on the road heading south. It would take me about an hour or so to get back into town, where the department would likely have agents stationed all around on the lookout for entities or me. In which case, I would definitely need a gun. I pressed on the brakes and decelerated to a complete stop. Something large and limp lay dead in the road. I squinted through the windshield, quickly picking out pieces of human anatomy. Pulling up next to it, the body of a young adult male, probably in his early 20s, lay sprawled out on the road. He was dressed in black denim attire with dark makeup and a couple of metal piercings running along his ear. The front of his black tank top had a rather large hole in it, where blood pooled out of and soaked the rest of the fabric. The bullet seemed to have gone all the way through, causing a puddle of blood to collect underneath him. I looked down both ways of the road, not seeing another car in sight, and then turned my attention to the fields. That's when I saw, in the distance, what appeared to be two adult male figures walking away towards the tree line with scoped rifles in their hands. I quickly examined the face of the corpse. There were no obvious signs indicating the male was an entity. You definitely wouldn't be able to tell from a distance. I don't know. It's possible he was walking in an untypical fashion. At least they thought so. It was noon by the time I made it to Lakeside. The sun stayed hidden by a blanket of clouds, which cast the landscape in muted tones. On the side of the road was the old blue painted sign with an old nuclear warrior font that said, "Welcome to Lakeside, population of 600. Behind the sign was a couple more miles of wheat fields that had just been harvested. In one of these fields off to the left, standing tall above the remains of wheat was a scarecrow, and below it was a group of humanoid figures mimicking its crucified demeanor. If there was one thing I knew, it's that no other organism on this planet was more skilled at the art of mimicry than the doppelganger. They lived for it. A parasitic nature to copy, manipulate, and destroy. Years of studying and their origins were still a mystery. It was a question of whether or not they're from this world to begin with, or if they came from somewhere else. I thought about this as I passed through the empty streets of Lakeside, the sidewalks abandoned and littered with trash. Then there was the vinyl walkway, which spewed out smoke from its front doors, as a fire blazed inside, and I heard no sirens, indicating that help would not be coming. Someone was following me. A black sedan was trailing about 50 feet behind me, and I watched it closely in my rearview mirror, observing the dark figure sitting behind the wheel. They must have had an agent posted somewhere outside of town, or maybe they had spotted Marco and me outside in the parking lot, in which case, he wouldn't last long. It was convenient that Mary's was on the way into town, because I had to stop there anyway. I had swung into the barren parking lot after pumping a little gas to get out of sight of the tail. I reasoned I had a few minutes at best, before they caught up. Mary's itself was empty. The lights were off inside, and the booths were empty. I was partially afraid it would have been locked when I approached the door, but it swung open with the wind banging against the side of the booth and shaking the doorbell into a screaming fit. The noise died down, and I stood there in silence, listening. A sharp squeak across a slightly polished floor. My head snapped to the hallway leading to the office, where Jerry slowly waddled out, tired and confused.
Hello. Welcome. It's been awfully quiet around here lately.
I nodded without responding, as I stared at him. He had that same friendly stare that masked his confusion. But his eyes, they were more rapid and alert for some reason. He scratched his head.
Can I get you anything, sir? Some eggs, maybe. I just have to find the meat. I think I have it in the back.
The words sent off alarm bells in my head. I hadn't seen Jerry in a while. It's possible his condition could have worsened. Where's Tina? Doesn't she work today? Jerry squinted at me.
Who's Tina?
It didn't mean a whole lot, but it made me feel a little better. Never mind,
Maybe Mary would know. Oh, I don't know. Do you know if there's something going on outside? This lady was talking about it over the radio.
Yes. I heard something about that.
What do we do?
Without answering, I glanced over my shoulder just in time to see a black sedan speeding past down the road. He likely saw my car and was stepping on the brakes to swing around and come back. I wasn't sure about Jerry, but I was running low on options. I need to see you're safe, Jerry.
My safe?
Yes, you're safe. In your office. Mary sent me to get some files.
Oh.
He slowly nodded, as if he understood, then turned around and walked down the hallway. I quickly followed behind, while keeping a safe distance, but stopped when he opened the door to his office and stood aside, waiting for me to enter. His face stayed the same, like a statue, which wasn't abnormal for him, yet his hand twitched like an internal gear was going haywire. It reminded me of the slight twitching of muscles one might see in a tiger or some other predator right before they leap for the kill. I thought about taking a step, when I looked over my shoulder and saw the sedan pull into the parking lot. I suppressed the urge to run for the woods. Logic kicked fast enough to remind me that I wouldn't make it far. I took a step forward and stepped past Jerry, keeping my eye on him, as I crouched in front of the safe.
I don't remember the code too well.
That wouldn't be a problem. I watched Jerry open this safe 1,000 times, so the first couple of digits came easy. I spun the dial to the last two and pulled the lever, only for it to not budge. I glanced over my shoulder. Jerry watched silently from the doorway. I asked if he remembered the last two numbers, and he stood silent for a minute before twisting his head back and forth like a machine on a set rotation. I quickly spun the first two, then tried a different combination for the last two, no use. I repeated the process, occasionally checking on Jerry to make sure he stayed put. He was still in the doorway, but I think he moved an inch forward. It was then that his eyes widened a little. I flinched, and then his head turned to look down the hall, where the front doorbell had rung out. My heart jumped, and I turned back to put in another combination, as Jerry wandered off to see who it was, but I knew. I put in another combination, no use.
Hello.
I jumped but took a deep breath and spun the first two numbers, 3, 6, then put in the last combination in my head, as the slight tap of boots against tiles made its way down the hall, 7. 7. There was an audible click, and the latch turned, as I pulled on it and swung the safe door open. Something whizzed by my ear and sprang off the edge of the safe. I ducked and grabbed the revolver inside before spinning around and unloading into the doorway. The agent flew back against the wall, decorating it with a streak of blood, before falling limp to the ground. A ringing was left in my ear in the wake of it. My heart flew around like a blind bird in my chest, slamming into the bodily confines of my bones. I took a couple of breaths before grabbing a couple of more rounds and leaving for the door. I was halfway down the hallway when the sound of a radio called out. Behind me, hanging off the adult male's belt was a walkie-talkie, flickering red. Static spilled through the speaker, casting out a voice.
This is Charlie, Observation Squad 9. Observation Squad 14 has gone radio silent since entering the gymnasium. I repeat, radio silent. Entity presence likely inside.
I took the agent's keys and checked his car. Didn't find anything up front, but in the trunk was a bag full of explosives, one of them being a rigged-up stick of C4 with a settable timer. The Cold War on entities had ended, our discreet tactics were being left by the wayside. I went back inside and behind the counter. I picked up the phone and called Marco. He answered on the second ring. I found her. From the outside, a dark, hollow space rested behind the gymnasium's windows. Gone were the flashing lights. Some of the prom decorations were still up, yet they had lost their color and nostalgic magic, as banners blew like loose skin in the wind and streamers littered the ground like dead worms. It was a little after 1 on a Friday afternoon, and the students were gone. The parking lot lay mostly desolate like the rest of them. Everybody was in the know now. And the truth sent them scurrying into their caves, blocking the entrance off with boulders and further sealing themselves away in the dark. A ghost town was left behind with a pillar of smoke rising in the distance. The RD agents likely had the building surrounded. If Marco could make it to the car without getting spotted or shot, the rest of the plan should be fine. The C4 sat in the passenger seat, armed and ready. He just had to park it outside the wall, set the bomb, and run. I swung into the parking lot, stopped the vehicle in front of the entrance, left the keys in the ignition, and ran inside. A disturbing tranquility floated through that empty hall devoid of students and school spirit. Wilted post-it boards and flyers about graduation hung on the walls, documenting evidence of what this space used to be. I'd never gone to many pep rallies. Always someone who needed to be surveilled. I'd be sitting in a car, watching someone else's life through the lens of a camera, while the rest of my peers stood together, chanting a series of slogans, getting high off school spirit. It's all gone now. I approached a set of double doors leading to the gym floor. A banner hung above it advertising the dance, decorated with our signature white and blue colors. I never knew the reasoning behind those colors. I hadn't realized up until that point that we had a goat for a mascot, a 6-year attendance with nothing to show for. A quick arrow of grief shot through my heart, and I let the pain settle for a minute, as I pulled out my revolver. It wasn't much, but it would have to do. When I opened the doors, a ray of pale light fell onto a figure resembling Lucy in the middle of the gym floor. The shadows surrounding her sketched a general picture of masses of mangled flesh and orifices, all twisted vertically like trees from hell. I drew a cold breath and steadily raised my weapon, feeling a mix of fear and pain in my chest, as I observed those blue eyes again. They were a vibrant shade of teal. I crept forward, quickly scanning the rest of the floor for any movement or sign of JJ. Passing by one of the trees, the subtle hint of a moan escaped from it, as a limb of some kind weakly reached out to touch my shoulder. Sewn into the flesh was black cloth and Kevlar representing the mangled remains of the 14th Observation Squad. I choked down whatever substance was trying to come up and stalk several feet from the entity. My mind struggled to process it. A face that had been treated like a ghost, a distant memory, was now standing in front of me with a small grin on its face. I just stared, and it returned the favor. Then, it offered her hand and bowed, while continuing to stare at me, a gesture with a courtly connotation. "Where's JJ?" I asked, not knowing whether or not it could even understand me. I kept my weapon aimed at the space between its eyes. It looked to be about 45 millimeters apart. "I want to know where my sister is."
Then dance with me.
It waved its hand a little, gesturing for me to come forward. I cocked the hammer back. "Where is she?"
You want information? Then you have to work for it. You should know that better than anyone.
"You don't know me."
We know enough.
My finger was pressing down on the trigger. It would only take a couple more pounds of pressure to liquefy its head. Then I heard her JJ's gentle breeze of a voice. I shuddered, as it spilled out of the thing's open jaw, as if someone had pulled on a string to make it talk. I looked away from it towards the dark, hoping to see JJ tied up somewhere off in the dark. Then my eyes landed on the wall with the windows sitting at the top, radiating with the murky light of an overcast afternoon. They faced the parking lot. Marco just had to park the vehicle outside of it and let the hardware do its thing. I took a breath and holstered the weapon.
I've never danced before. Show me.
I stepped forward, cautiously placing my left hand in its own, a soft yet cold touch, and placed my right hand on its waist, keeping it within reachable distance of my weapon. It pulled me in and laid its other hand over my shoulder.
Lead.
Truth was, I had never danced either. None of my experiences up until that point had called for it. So I copied what I saw in the cartoons of my adolescent days, where the characters would swirl and glide across the floor like a flower across the surface of a lake. I took one step backward, and it stumbled after me, then moved back, as I stepped forward again. Its eyes widened, as they gazed at the steps my feet were taking. It soon gathered enough data to mimic my steps, and our stiff movements became well-oiled and tuned. We moved on a set track across the unpolished floor, back and forth, like figurines in a music box, all while the organic scenery around us pulsated and groaned. "How did you know where to find me?" Its face looked like it was made of stone.
You're not the only one with a network of eyes.
"Where's JJ?"
Where's Sarah?
The question shot my response dead.
Where's Donnie? Where's Jenny? What about Henry or Parker?
I was doing my job.
What? To protect the community? You have no community. You never knew these people. You're an intruder, a wolf.
It grabbed hold of my right hand before I could reach for my gun and ripped us both off our designated track. We both spun there amongst that organic nature, and her stare burrowed into my eyes in an attempt to reach down into the depths of my being.
Did you know Sarah had a crush on Stephen Kendall in algebra class? Did you know Parker's favorite food was his mother's breadcrumb casserole? Did you know the owner of the Groove Line used to be a drummer, or did you just know his name?
She froze, causing me to stumble.
You don't know these people. Even if you wanted to know, they'd know what you were once you got clues.
The natural instinct came to deny it. To shake the accusation away, shoot the thing dead, and be done with it. But it was right, I didn't know them, I didn't know anybody. If those alien lights came back on from that night, and this floor was filled with students, dancing in each other's arms, I'd stand amongst them like a dog sniffing around for contraband. All those people, to protect them and their perception of their world, I have to find the threat, but how do you catch an enigma when all that you know is false? There are no methods, no secret tips, or clues, no guide. When you don't know anything, how can you be sure of anything? All those people? It could have been any of them. They could have been anywhere, sitting next to you in class, eating with you at lunch, watching TV with you in your own home, sleeping next to you in bed. In this world, there are no walls that can protect you. No locks to keep the thing you fear the most out. None of it matters when you don't know what the threat looks like. You're just as likely to let it walk freely into your home and smell the flowers you put up. If this room were filled with people, I'd be against the corner, hissing at all of them like a scared animal. Were you ever scared? The thing twitched then, like its circuitry had hit a snag.
Scared?
It let the word hang in the air like a puzzle to be solved, letting its grip on me loosen, as it pondered the question. But that was probably the only thing I knew for certain, whether or not I was scared. I ripped my hand free and grabbed my weapon, smashing the butt of it across the thing's head before pushing it back and taking aim. It stumbled for a moment before regaining its balance. It stared in silence for a moment, as it readjusted itself. I know what I am. And I know. At least I know you're not what you say you are. We danced, now where is my sister?
Being judged as we speak by your so-called community.
I aimed my weapon at the space between its eyes, wondering at the same time where Marco was. I lowered my weapon. The gunshot had echoed from outside. Then a cacophony of gunfire erupted in the parking lot. A bullet even whizzed through one of the windows, sending pieces of glass to the gym floor. Screams began to erupt, and orders were given. I could hear the squawk of the radio and commands being given. All of it mixed together to create the soundscape of a battlefield. Then it died off gradually. Fewer shots were fired until none were fired at all. I could hear talking now. I'd imagine the ERD had caught Marco, hopefully, as he was getting out of the car. The bomb would go off any second. Then I glanced at the entity. It was smiling. It reached up to the mask of Lucy's face and dug one of her glossed-over nails into the temple of its forehead. It slid it across steadily and precisely, leaving a thick blood trail in its path. It pulled its finger away, dripping with blood, and fell to the ground in a helpless position. Then it screamed. But not the inhuman one of an entity. It was the stereotypical scream of a damsel in distress, high-pitched, blood-curdling. I heard voices, closer now, and spun, as the doors to the gymnasium burst open. 2 male figures rushed in with rifles at their side.
What the fuck? Is that Lucy? Shit, watch out.
The other said, as he raised his rifle at me. I ducked, as the shot went off and whizzed by my head. I raised my weapon and fired 2 shots at him. He fell limply to the ground. The thing's wails warped to the cry of a demon, and I spun around and fired twice, as it leaped at me. Before its body flew back and hit the ground, I spun back around and shot the other male, as he took aim with his shotgun. I stood there, breathing heavily for a second, in the wake of it all, and it was when the ringing in my ears died down that I realized one of the men was Mr. Tordet, my algebra teacher. I ran through the halls and out the entrance I came through. There was a fire somewhere, you could taste the smoke in the air. Something moved out of the corner of my eye before a wave of blunt force crashed into the back of my skull. I hit the ground, and the weight of someone's boot quickly pinned me there, while another picked my weapon out of my hands. Voices sprang up all around me, as a sharp pain ripped across the back of my head. When my vision steadied, an adult male came into view with a rifle pointed right at me. We recognized each other at the same time.
It's Z.
Shoot him now.
A group of townsfolk corralled around him, all armed with some sort of firearm or tool, along with a healthy dose of fear.
Everyone, hold on.
Tommy tilted his head to study my face. I opened my mouth to speak to him when another male burst through the doors, terror flaring in his eyes like a wildfire.
He killed them, Tommy. He shot both of them, and there were these things.
Tommy jumped back with the rifle still aimed at me. Tommy,
Shut the fuck up.
he said, his voice shaky and tense. He looked around at the group and then back at me before giving a groan of discomfort.
Bring him to Peters. He'll give his opinion on him.
They carried me across the parking lot with my arms held behind me. Bodies unfurled across the concrete, the RD and townsfolk alike. Blood and shell casings lay amongst them. As they stuffed me into the trunk of one car, I could see John, bound and gagged, get stuffed in the bed of a truck. I got shoved into the back of a car, and as we drove off, I spotted my own vehicle off to the side, and Marco's face peering through the driver's side window. They drove me to the town hall, the heart of the downtown area, and set up across the street in Bangslow Park was a large bonfire. A paralyzing terror burned away the feeling in my legs, and I had to be pulled out of the car, as two more adult males burst out of the town hall doors, holding by the arms a young woman. Her name was Ophelia Connor. She was a sophomore, with green eyes, a bobbed haircut, and that's all I knew about her. And with her feet sliding across concrete, she wore a clay mask of dreadful acceptance, as they dragged her off towards the park with the dark smoke of the bonfire beginning to condense into its own entity above her, above the borders of the town, and beyond. The main hall, where residents of Lakeside sat in rows of pews to vote on rules of law, had now been converted into a makeshift shelter house for those who wished to stick with the tribe during dark times. Families and residents all sat in pews with the pieces of their lives now stuffed into suitcases and backpacks. And as Tommy and the rest of his squad brought me up the center aisle with a rifle trained on my back, the people of Lakeside leered, uncertain of what I was, while holding their individual worlds close to them with a fierce grip. Their eyes tracked me to the front of the room, where, standing in front of an elevated council table, Deputy Peters and a few other armed male figures stood with their weapons aimed at John. On his knees, bruised and bleeding from the shoulder, he still wore that blank, emotionless expression. He gave a simple glance and said nothing. But Deputy Peters couldn't stop looking, searching my features for confirmation that it was indeed me, Z. I didn't have anything to say to debunk his doubts. How does one prove they are themselves? In his eyes, a pin of grief, deflating his grave demeanor, then blinked away with a flash of betrayal, as he pulled his focus to John.
He's one of yours?
John nodded.
How long, Z?
His face was twisted, as the sour truth settled in his mouth.
If you're Z, how long you been working for him?
It was finished. The words ripping the skin off my body in one clean sweep. I was left standing there, naked and bloody, the eyes of the public burning away my flesh. With a choke sob leaping from my throat, stinging tears pierced my eyes shut. Mark. I need to find my sister. Do you know where? Is she here? John gave an annoyed sigh. We've had him employed for a few months. It was the most loose-lipped I had ever seen him, probably the truest indicator that everything was lost. What was the point in lying anymore?
How long have you known about these things?
Long enough.
Why didn't you say anything?
To that, John chuckled and looked around the room at all the newly displaced people, scared and tired, glancing wildly at one another. Peters raised his gun.
Wait, hold in.
An adult male, probably in his late 20s, named Vincent Aldera stepped forward.
He might know something. I saw it on the news. These guys like to study those things, know how to spot them and all that. You should know what's what.
John chuckled again. He smiled. They all looked at each other with uncertainty.
Ask him what they did with our boys.
A female voice screamed out from behind us. I looked back to see it was Mrs. Baxter, Henry's mother. A murmur spread among the crowd, and they all looked back towards John. I believe Z can answer that one. He chuckled again, tilting his head towards me. All the blood that floods these streets will be on your hands. Peter's shot cut him off, silencing the rest of the room. They dragged John off and put me in his place, knocking me onto my knees with a butt to the back of the head. Tommy moved over to Peter's side, keeping his eyes pinned on me.
We found him at the gymnasium along with a squad of those goons. He shot 2 of our guys, including Mr. Corbett.
Peter solemnly nodded before pointing the weapon at me. Where was Marco? I wondered then. Over Peter's shoulder, I could see the mostly abandoned parking lot and the empty road spiraling off into the distance behind it. If he wasn't dead, then he was probably on the highway, driving far away from this nightmare.
Is it true?
I didn't know. I didn't know he was there. Mark.
Don't. No.
He looked up to the sky to hide his tears before turning back towards me.
You lied. To all of us. Every day, for months. Damn it, Z, I don't know what's happening. I don't know who you are.
I shook my head, meeting his eyes with my own. It's me, Mark. I am human.
Nope, no.
Tommy said, shaking his head.
Look, I know Z, alright. I watched him come in and out of Mary's almost every day, and he's always been a little off, but this thing ain't right.
He'd always nod and smile at me with a mouthful of eggs every time I came. Sometimes, when JJ would be hanging out in the front with Tina, he'd always promise to buy her a slice of pie, if she behaved. He never did, having created a lie to keep a semblance of order.
Look, his boss said that they were after him, remember?
Tommy pointed a finger at me.
Probably 'cause he ain't who he says.
That's not what happened.
Shut up.
Tommy stepped forward with the rifle pointed at my head, before he was pulled back.
Tommy, get your shit together, right now.
Peters turned back towards me.
Why were they after you?
I broke protocol. They don't like mistakes.
What protocol?
Termination. Amelia Dennis.
Heard someone took her. Drove off with her in the night.
She knew things, and I didn't. I didn't do it. I tried to save her.
Tried.
She was already gone. Peter's jaw grew tight, as his index finger ran along the edge of the trigger guard. He looked back towards the crowd and Mrs. Baxter.
Your boss said you'd know out the boys, Donnie, Henry, Parker.
Donnie, Henry, Parker. All seniors, white males, 18-19 years old, along with a list of other features that maybe somebody would find useful in this new environment. But my mind kept going back to those campsite photos on Marco's wall, where they existed in some other reality. In it, something was strung between them that bound them together, kept them smiling, made those captured moments worthy of hanging up on a wall. It was an alien space for me. They wanted to be with each other, and in that desire, they had found things about the other that 100 hours of surveillance couldn't discover, things no one else would ever be able to learn, with the memories inside of Marco's head, and the photos hanging up on his wall, serving as the only pieces of evidence that such a thing had even occurred between them.
Now's not the time to stay quiet, Z.
I killed them. The truth of it all brought silence. Tommy and the rest, with their rifles and blunt objects, held a piercing still gaze. Peter said nothing, looking up towards the ceiling, hoping to find something there. Ms. Baxter's cry shattered the silence.
Were they one of them?
I shook my head and forced myself to look up at him. They knew too much. It took everyone a minute to swallow the monster that I had just birthed out in front of me, its form hideous and uncomfortably shaped.
And Sarah? And Julie?
Peter's expression grew stern. I nodded.
Why were you at the school?
JJ, it took her.
I heard.
Peter's focus wavered for a moment, as his eyes were pulled by a stray thought.
I'm sorry about your loss.
He lowered the gun and stepped over to Tommy.
Peters, that's all the evidence we need. It's now or never. It's him or the rest of us.
He sighed a heavy breath.
He's not one of them. He's whoever that is.
Peters then leaned in close to Tommy and whispered. Tommy recoiled.
Are you goddamn crazy?
He might see something we can't.
Mark.
We'll see just how well they've trained you.
He stepped aside, as Tommy went off into a back room with a few other armed male figures. People in the front began moving their stuff towards the back, as we waited. Peters didn't say anything, even when I spoke to him. He leaned against the council table with his weapon resting by his side, tapping against his pant leg. An adult male stood behind me with a bolt-action hunting rifle in front of him, the barrel aimed loosely in my general direction. I thought, if I was quick, that I could have shoved him and made a run for the main door, but Peters would be behind me with an easy shot on my back, and I would die there on the carpet, and JJ would be somewhere. My spirits then lifted one, out the window on the other side of the room. A car with a burgundy coat of paint pulled into the parking lot. I even thought I could see Marco sitting in the driver's seat. Then the back door opened, and walking out with a calm, muted expression, wearing an innocent pony t-shirt, and staring with eyes so big they could swallow your heart, JJ appeared in front of me. Something activated within me, and I suddenly had the strong urge to scoop her up and take us home, turn on the television, and lock the doors. But the room fell silent. And JJ stopped in her tracks when Peters stood up from the council table and raised his weapon at her head. I leapt up, aiming to rush Peterson, when the male behind me cracked the end of his rifle across the back of my head before being pinned to the ground by two townsfolk. What are you doing? She's. Tommy backed out of the door with his gun pointed, as another young female adolescent walked out with a similar muted expression and larger-than-life eyes. JJ's twin stopped right next to the other one, and they both stood silently like identical toy dolls you'd find on a shelf. I felt the air rush out of my mouth, my lungs pressing against my ribcage, and my throat ripping itself apart, but I didn't hear myself scream, for there was a sudden ringing that consumed my hearing, flooding out the world and all its contents. I tried to break away from it all, but the weight just increased, as they waved over more guys to hold me down. Peters gestured, causing me to be picked up and dumped on my knees in front of the twins. Sound slowly rolled back in, as Peters picked my head up, telling me to pay attention.
You can spot them, yeah? Then do your family a favor and put that skill to good use.
I sobbed in front of the two of them, not even knowing which one to look at. All I could do was spout apologies in their direction, hoping my sister would hear my words and know. Peters crouched down in front of me and leaned in close.
I have a lot of people to look after here, Z. And people are scared right now. They don't know what they're up against. I bet you do, though. Your boss said you'd been working with them for a while, so you need to do this.
He said whoever I didn't pick would be quarantined for a certain amount of time, to check if I was correct, and then released back to me. Afterward, they'd send us on our way, for we were too abnormal to live with the tribe. I shook my head helplessly.
You can do this, Z.
Peters said, grabbing my shoulder.
You have to do this, Z. You have to. I don't know what this is.
I looked at the two of them. I looked into their eyes, sweeping and bottomless. Whichever one was hers, she's seen too much. She'll never talk, never laugh, never respond in a human-like manner ever again, for her mind will be somewhere else, far away from here, in a locked room.
Mom, she's...
Tommy said beside me, keeping his weapon trained on them.
You should know what your own sister looks like.
Took a deep, painful breath and sat back on my legs, examining a face I had seen all my life. The one precious face I knew. But each face had those amber eyes similar to mine, and that thin brown hair tied back up in a ponytail. There were no features out of place or missing, no loose skin, only the smooth circular face that you wanted to cup in your hands and rub its cheeks.
You have to choose now.
Peter said, a hand on my shoulder. I scanned their features meticulously. Every time I thought I saw a discrepancy, a strangely colored strand of hair here, or an abnormal mark there, I'd blink, and it would be gone like it had been wiped away. So I focused in, hoping to see the twitch of a nerve, a speck that didn't belong, a different shade of color, anything. There was nothing. It wasn't there, or I couldn't see it. Maybe I never knew how to see it in the first place. Maybe this was the nature of fighting against an enemy that was constantly evolving, copying, gaining knowledge of how to act through the watchful eyes of a neighbor, a parent, a sibling. It was over. We had reached perfect assimilation. I was once again left in the dark, and I wanted nothing more than to just reach out and grab my sister, hold her in my arms. To protect her, when I'm not there, to shield her from things she wouldn't understand, to tell her it's going to be alright even when the answer isn't clear. Peter squeezed my shoulder, pushing me to make a decision or to give up entirely, because what detail was there to go off of? And he was right, so I zoomed out, because there are things I know about my sister that others couldn't know from just looking at her with nothing but fear. At the moment, I realized that JJ wasn't here. She had abandoned this realm full of bad actors and rubber mask freaks for a space beyond the confines of her own mind, where she could watch from a safe distance the runnings of this world and what it did to her. To get to her, all I had to do was follow her lead. I detached myself from this world and left the confines of my situation to float above it, watching my body sit on its knees below me before turning to see JJ staring at me. She reached out to me, and I squeezed her against my chest, smelling her stale ponytail. I met her eyes then, and a smile broke out across her face with all her baby teeth flashing. It's me. Your brother. Keeping her smile, she leaned in closer, and in her eyes, I saw recognition.
Look out!
She said, looking down at where my body sat when I came back. I was staring into the eyes of JJ on my right. A breath of relief escaped me.
Holy shit.
Tommy pointed his pistol towards the window, as my car came barreling down towards the wall. I shoved Peters aside and tackled JJ out of the way, as the far wall burst open and a vehicle crashed into the space and skidded past us. There was the roar of falling infrastructure and yells from the crowd, but it died off when the dust settled. I coughed and swiped the dust particles from my eyes, as I looked up to where a giant hole sat punctured in the wall. But in the middle of all that chaos was JJ nestled quietly in my arms, wearing that same mute expression which had not changed. Through the dusty haze, Deputy Peters stood up and coughed. His attention lingered over to the car, where the bodies of Tommy and the female adolescent entity lay together. He coughed and looked back towards me, and then at the revolver lying between us on the ground. I shoved JJ to the ground and leaped towards it with Peters following suit. But he fell just short, falling to the ground and getting dragged backward. I snatched up the pistol and looked up in time to see Vincent Alderazan melted anatomy pick Tommy up and wrap its expansive mouth around his head. His screams were muffled as his body flailed. I didn't hesitate. I fired a couple rounds into the falling mass, sending it to the ground.
Shit, he's got a gun.
Another armed figure raised his weapon at me before getting knocked backward with the strike of thunder. Marco pumped his shotgun before yelling at me.
We got to go. We got to go right now.
I remembered the C4. A wailing cry erupted from the crowd as the form of an elderly adult female lost its shape and lashed out at another armed townsfolk, dragging its prey off behind a pew. Screams bounced off the walls as shots were fired.
They're here! They're inside!
People cried and stumbled over the pews as some of their neighbors ripped off the masks they had been wearing and scooped out whatever poor soul was within reach. Weapons were aimed, and the shadows of ghastly forms were illuminated against the walls as muzzles flashed. I ducked as a bullet whizzed above my head and fired at a stray townsfolk with their weapon pointed at me. I snatched up JJ before they hit the ground and ran for the wall with Marco close behind, firing slugs at whatever discrepancy he could spot. The cool, smoky air reached my lungs, and I ran for the parking lot. I hugged my sister tighter as all three of us dove behind a station wagon. The gunshots and screams were cut off by the pound of a mountain smashing into the earth at 100 miles per hour, sending shattering glass and debris showering over the parking lot and us. I covered JJ's head, letting my eardrums rock back and forth from the sound wave. I stayed there for a moment with her in my arms, remembering the smell of her hair and the frail nature of her body. Soon, the cry of high-pitched bells in my ears subsided, and Marco tapped on my shoulder. His voice was hard yet muffled.
We got to go.
I stood up with her face buried in my chest and looked upon the remains of the town hall. A beast of smoke and fire rising up out of the rubble of a place where residents came to discuss with their neighbors. In the distance, the wind picked up the screams of those who survived, and the screams of those who didn't belong to this world.
North Farmstead. Is Seven there with you, or do I need to log them off?
He's with me.
10-4. East River 5 and 7. This call came in at 1901. Advised a male and a female were arguing with each other near to the car dealership that's over there, the southeast corner. It's a white male, 50 years old, 6 foot, medium build, he has gray hair, he has jeans and is driving a motorcycle. And then there's a white female, 5'4" to medium build, thin build, and she has an orange hoodie to a red plaid bag with her. The male suspect is possibly gone, and the female was walking around in the area.
The new mission was to leave the worlds we had built for ourselves in the small town of Lakeside. So about a few days later, after trudging on foot past torched barn sheds and crop fields guarded by scarecrows, we found ourselves in a small abandoned cabin back in the woods. But with the news on the radio, it wasn't enough, we had to run farther. The plan was to sneak back into town and hotwire a couple of cars, which Marco had to provide instructions on how to do. We decided it'd be best to do it in the early morning to avoid stalking about at night, when moaning could be heard in the dark, or during the day, when bands of hunters roamed with bolt-action rifles and double barrels, and at the crack of dawn, a civilian was not likely to be found in the open, and there was less of a chance that something could sneak up on you. This needed to be done soon. It wouldn't have been long before parties of hunters came trampling through the bush, searching for discrepancies. Until then, we stayed in the cabin, feeding off of canned goods and cooked critters like cavemen. JJ had not said anything. All she did was eat and sleep, as she continued to wear that muted, bug-eyed look. I thought it was odd. I had hoped, after things died down, that she'd come back down from whatever cloud she was sitting in and look at me with some hint of familiar recognition. Marco found this lack of recovery more than a little concerning.
You sure she's all right?
He asked in a hushed tone, while we both sat by the fireplace one night. JJ was asleep nearby in a small room. The door was shut and locked. She's fine, Marco.
How do you know? Look, I know she's been through a lot, and she seemed like a quiet kid the last time we met up, but this ain't normal.
She's always been this way.
That might not be your sister.
Stop, I said, glancing at her door. She's fine.
You sure about that?
I bit my tongue. Yes.
And if she's not, what then?
What are you so afraid of?
That she isn't your sister.
The possibility simmered in my mind then, as the fireplace crackled. He glanced toward the revolver lying between the two of us.
This is a fucked situation, man, but...
I snatched up the revolver and walked out onto the porch. It was dark out, and I stood on the border between the reach of the cabin's light and the void of the night. I felt so lost then, my thoughts all tangled and corrupted by fear and just pure exhaustion. I couldn't even make out the branches of trees or anything in between. The boards of the porch groaned under my weight, threatening to cave in and bury me under the house. The desire was strong, then, to walk off that porch, detach myself from the ground, and float up into the black sky, where past the confines of the atmosphere, I would float amongst the stars, shining bright as ever, and fly with JJ, and we would watch the things of this world eat one another in a state of blind frenzy. Detached from it all, we'd become aliens to the world. But we'd be together. Still, I cried at my sister's door for the past memories of her, for she would never be the same. She had seen too much of this world. Could she hear me in there? The last time I saw her truly smile was on a Saturday morning, years ago. It was back in that apartment. He was gone for the day, and my mother had woken up early and was sober enough to make us parfaits or something close to it. I didn't care either way. To this day, it's the best thing I've ever eaten. But JJ, when she took that bite, and joy erupted from that little blueberry nestled inside a blanket of vanilla Greek yogurt, planting a toothy, yogurt-smeared grin across her stuffed cheeks, I forgot where I was. I forgot that he was supposed to be coming back later that afternoon. The last time we had parfaits was at Mary's, when Tina served them to us on a silver platter. JJ, by this point, had begun to withdraw from the world, but that parfait brought her back, briefly, with a smirk at the edge of her lips. Tina snuffed out her cigarette in an old coffee mug and knelt down to rub JJ's cheek.
I think she liked that. Didn't she?
That was, before she started seeing Mr. Sullivan, before I saw her at his house, before the argument, before I broke into her apartment and heard that thing's voicemail on her answering machine. I had thought it suspicious that she had stopped smoking. But that was, before I found the sobriety token sitting on her bedside table. She had been off them for about a week. When I played the tape back in my head of the noise she made, as I drove away with JJ, her voice rippling and shattering, I heard her heart breaking, as I ripped JJ from her world, leaving her with nothing but the thing that wore Mr. Sullivan's face. I wished I could look at her picture again, but the only picture I had left was my own. A Polaroid of a scared animal. But I'm not a wolf. I'm nothing more than a blind hunter trying to protect sheep in a land of wolves dressed in wool clothes. Those of the flock are picked off in the dark of night, and then they are found dead in their homes in the light of day, where they felt the safest, and I stand with blood-stained hands, not knowing whether it belongs to my neighbors or something else, and I have no defense or answers to give as to why I decided to shoot my classmate, or why I chose to lie to my family, or why I cut off those who loved me more than anything. All I could do was cry out for my mom. Help me, mother, I'm scared, and I can't see. One morning, I unlocked her door and found her sitting on the edge of the bed like a statue. I wasn't sure if she had been sitting like that all night or not, and I didn't care. Kneeling in front of her, her hands still had that smooth texture, and her stare still gave nothing but silence. That toothy grin and the joy she used to manifest were probably swirling above her, where her mental self looked on with glee, happy to see her brother once again. I squeezed her hands. JJ. I'm sorry, but the world is not as it was. We have to move, and we might come across danger. No response. People are scared right now, but I leaned in and kissed her on the forehead like my mother would, long enough to leave a mark. I know who you are. She continued to stare. I love you. I'm your brother, and I'm going to take care of you. Nothing will happen to you. I pulled her off the bed and hugged her, keeping her close like a cherished heirloom. For she was all that was left. I didn't even flinch, nor tense, as she wrapped her arms limply around my shoulders. The next day, I was driving back towards the cabin from Lakeside in a slightly aged Ford Escort. It had been sitting abandoned in a supermarket parking lot, a decent acquisition that could take JJ and me wherever we wanted to go, and it only took a few minutes to hotwire. In the passenger seat were a couple bags of supplies I had picked up from the house we used to live in. I didn't plan on it, but I was in town, so I thought it wouldn't hurt to do a little scavenging. My time spent there was short. An FM channel had spoken about military convoys moving in soon, and I didn't wish to stick around and find out how friendly they were. None of it mattered. I wouldn't have stayed if I had the time. No nostalgia was to be found inside those walls, even the ones decorated with family photos. The authorities had taken my mother's body, but the stain was still there, dark and dried up. Running my fingers across it, there was no warmth to be found, as I had foolishly hoped. I then took a moment to breathe in the stillness of the house. No longer recognized, this person standing inside its walls was given the cold shoulder, and it felt like all the other houses he had broken into when he had started out with the department. After taking a few bags of clothes, some food, personal items, and the family photo hanging on the wall with the cracked frame, I left for good. When I got to the cabin, JJ was sitting on the porch steps. I picked her up and sat her in the back seat, where I reached into one of the bags and pulled out a violet pillow with her initials spelled out in red string. She held it like a foreign object she had found on the ground and said nothing. I thought maybe it would take time. Lucky for us, we had all the time in the world. I didn't know where we were going, but it would be far away from here. Hundreds of miles of road and military checkpoints sat between us and our dream destination. I was somewhat confident we were ready for the trip. I had even gone over some things with her, and she seemed to understand well enough. Getting into the driver's seat, my ears perked up to the steady creaking and rolling of machinery. Through the rear-view mirror, a car was coming down the path. I turned to look at JJ. Code purple. Without saying anything, she scooted aside and pulled the back seat down, leaving enough space for her to crawl into the trunk before closing it behind her. Her weight shifted around back there, as the car pulled in front of the cabin. I watched it with the door open and the revolver sitting in my lap. Marco got out, and we both shared a passive look with one another. Your stuff is on the porch. He kept an eye on me, as he went to grab it, and I cautiously turned my back to him, as I moved to cock the trunk. In it were a few suitcases and boxes that the previous owners of the vehicle had left behind. I pushed them to the side, pulled away the cover they were sitting in and pulled a small lever to lift up a lid, revealing a small compact compartment where JJ lay nestled inside. No response. I picked her up and strapped her back into the back seat. You did good. I said, kissing her on the forehead. I'm proud of you. I closed her door and turned, as Marco came down the stairs with his stuff. I blew out a cold breath. It's best to stay off the roads. There's going to be checkpoints on all major highways. If you see anybody, follow your instincts. I ran out of things to say. Marco chewed on the inside of his cheek before finally releasing whatever he had sitting inside in one long stream of cold air.
You know, part of me really wants to kill you right now. I won't. But only because, somehow, after all of this shit, you are the only person left in this entire world that I know.
He gave a small chuckle then, his voice breaking at the end there like a scratched record. The breeze came in and shook the trees around us, making them hum low, hissing tunes.
The last time I saw Lucy, it was that Wednesday, the week she went missing. All of us had run out to High Road Peak campsite, you know, Johnny, Parker, Henry, Sarah, Julie.
I nodded solemnly.
We made a fire, roasted marshmallows, complained about labs and classes, and all while Parker did his fucking homework. At some point in the night, I remembered I'd forgotten something at the car, and Lucy offered to come with me to get it. I didn't mind that at all. We didn't talk much on the way to the car, though. I mean, when you've known someone for that long, you've kind of said everything. But when we got to the car, when she was holding a box of something, she said that she was happy we could do things like camping and all that. And then she went quiet. And she waited. And waited. And waited. And I said nothing.
He bit down on his lip, as a wave of pain flashed across his face.
If I had just said the fucking words.
His eyes grew puffy and wet, as he crushed a dead leaf with his foot, grinding it to ash. He shot a quick, void look at me before turning around and heading towards his car. You should come with us. I blurted it out, hoping deep down that he would at least consider.
I'm happy we can do this together.
Marco started up the engine, backed up, and drove off.